All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Coach Tony here from Coach.me, and I am very honored to have one of our most successful coaches of all time, Rob Filardo. Rob, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I
Uh,
appreciate the opportunity.
so the way that the office hours works is we're trying to create a chance for people that are interested in Rob and the topics that Rob coaches to get to know Rob. I'm going to ask some questions. If people have questions from the chat, I might try to pull them in. I already warned two people who are attending live that I might pull them in later. But just to get started, Rob, I would like to hear your story about how you got into coaching.
Sure. I think this is probably not the standard story. Basically, what happened in my life was I went 100% remote for my company, and so I had a bit of a life change. I moved across the country, and I was at a moment where I wanted to start my own self-development journey. And so I started tracking my habits. I started exercising more and reading more. And so I picked up Lyft as my habit tracker, and so that was kind of where it all started for me. And I actually looked this up before our call. I think it was around 2014. I was contacted when I started meditating and tracking my meditation habits on Lyft, or now Coach.me. And it was asked to write a blog post around why meditation was, why I was meditating or how I found it useful. And it was around Father's Day, so I wrote about how meditation helped me be a better dad. I was really excited about that, where, that for the application that I was using, the community there reached out, you guys reached out to your users, and I was able to contribute. And, coming right off of that, I started to pay a lot more attention to my habits. And then I was pretty proud about being able to put something out there in the universe. And right around that time, I think it was around the time where Lyft kind of transitioned to Coach.me. And so as soon as I heard that you were looking for coaches within the community, it was definitely something where I felt, I had some time, and I was already investing a lot of time in learning it myself. And so I was willing to experiment, kind of just jump in, not really knowing what to expect, and just see if I liked it. And, it's really been, I really haven't looked back since. It's always been, evolving ever since then.
Right. It's when I say that you're one of the most successful coaches on our platform, I'm always, when I say something about that, about any of our coaches, I'm always talking about the track record, because I go back and I look at how successful are the clients, how reliably are you able to connect with the client and move them towards their goal. So you've coached now more than 500 people, and one of your earliest clients, Clark, has showed up here to test your memory, I think. Mm-hmm. And it just really, your track record has been amazing. And I know you a little bit through the community, but more so I know you through the testimonials that your clients leave. I want to say too, a little bit, for people that haven't experienced coaching, there's sort of two ways that coaches are created. One way is through training first, with the idea that with the right training, a coach could coach any topic. And we are sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, that we're looking for people with deep subject matter expertise that we could then give coach training to and turn them into specialized coaches around those bits of expertise. And so that's what happened to you, Rob, is that
right.
You had demonstrated that you had figured it out for yourself, and what we had wondered was, could you use that experience to coach, to help other people? And you've been through our training materials, but more importantly, now you've been through a couple of years of experience, and like now hundreds of clients.
Right.
So I'm curious, in that journey, how have you changed as a coach? Are there any things that stand out to you where you've learned to approach coaching differently?
Well, I would say at the very beginning, it was definitely a little bit of an internal struggle with imposter syndrome, a little bit, to say, at what point, and I think more and more, the more I worked at it and the more patience I had with it, and continuing to show up and to continue to work with everybody, each day, I started to realize that things that I might take for granted, everybody's different. Everybody has different skills and strengths, and certain things that I may not have found as, super valuable, or something that I might have been doing for a long time, that might be for somebody else. That might be the first time that they have heard it, and I would be able to provide value there. Right. So, I think originally getting over that idea of, what do I have to offer, or, what can I bring to the table for some folks who sign up, and I want to make sure that I can deliver value. I think that was one thing that I've been able to, over time, definitely get by and have confidence when I meet new people in a coaching relationship, to be able to know that I can provide value. Another thing is also being able to add more than just the subject matter itself, more than just like the topics or the best practices or the advice. I find that, especially like productivity coaching, a lot of people that sign up are extremely accomplished already. They've read all the books, listening to podcast books, they have all the material already. So, it's not really just for me to be able to spit out, here's the best practice for you. Sometimes, what I've been able to do more and more now is be able to relate to other previous client success, or, here's an example of, so-and-so who went through a very similar situation to you, and this is what we worked on to actually, get over that obstacle. And so if I can, it's almost like the difference between a book summary versus reading the full book, where you may get a little bit less out of the book summary because you got the advice or everything distilled down. But when you read the full book, you have all the context, or you have more narrative behind it. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that I can kind of bring more to the conversations now that I've had that larger client base of experience.
So let's talk about these clients. What are the Sure. goals that they're hiring you for, and why? Like, what are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish by working with you? So
I would say that, the primary habit that most people have signed up for is setting priorities for your day. And really, it's what I love about it is that it's incredibly generic. So I almost don't know what they're really intending behind that habit. So, what are their priorities is where there's so much variety, and it really keeps things interesting and exciting for me. And I'm, generally just curious. So the people that I can meet, in this very open-ended goal, that's also very popular. There's almost no limit as to who could sign up and who I can meet and work with, and try to find those same commonalities or those same patterns. But what I would say generally, I would say it's mostly for people who, let's say, I'm going to give some examples, like a business owner or a founder or a consultant, people who are kind of in charge of where they want to go next, who need a sounding board. They don't necessarily have people that they need, they have a lot more freedom and flexibility, but they can also be a double-edged sword where they don't have anybody to hold them accountable. Or even people who maybe have the day job, but they want to start, something I identify with, someone who has a day job, but they want to start something on their own independently, and they don't really know, they have nobody to talk to about it. So, I like to work with individuals that are looking for that sounding board and that second opinion, and, not necessarily business opinion, but just the idea of helping them stay true to their own individual goals that they've set for themselves. So that's primarily, where I found the most success with clients, working with those individuals.
So is there, you've done so much work on the set priorities, which is sort of originally framed as a habit, a daily habit.
Yes.
What's the other side of it? What is it like to set long-term goals? What are you doing there? What sort of work are you seeing? What sort of work are you seeing clients try to do?
Well, I've seen an entire spectrum, and I would say, as far as what I would want to emphasize with clients, would be overwhelmed by the idea of something like a yearly review or setting very long-term goals. I know from personal, that's the kind of thing that's very easy to defer. When, let's say right now, for me, it's a Friday afternoon. If I had, look at my annual review or look at my, create long-term goals as a task, that kind of feels like something that maybe should wait until another day. It just feels very large and very a little bit intimidating. And so I would say the very first step is to get something down on paper, out of your mind, even if it's just a matter of looking at what you want to accomplish and assigning some buckets or themes to everything that you want to move forward. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't need to be completely finalized at the moment, and you can refine it as you work through your year based on new information too. And really what I find is the yearly goals or the larger goals are much more high level, and then a mechanism such as a weekly review is where you can kind of continue to consult those ongoing. So it's almost like a mission statement, and then having a weekly review as the continuous checkpoints or the system that will allow you to remember those goals. So it's not just a moment in time where you thought about something in January and then remembered it again in July. We want to be able to kind of continually almost systematically look back at those goals and see if you've been able to accomplish any small steps towards those larger areas to help move them forward.
And then, so as you work that system, how much of adopting that, or as you adopt a system like that, how much of it is just learning the details of how to do it, and how much of it is like emotional or mental roadblocks to doing it?
Well, what I try to do with this, I would say that the system that I use myself is very low effort. I would say it's not as extremely intensive. I've actually heard of people putting almost 100 hours or so like onto an annual review, getting extremely granular. I've seen people write about those, and I'm very impressed, to be honest. But it's just not something that I could sustain myself. So I do feel like there's I want to lower the threshold for success. And make something that's very accessible for myself. I know I'll do it. I know just like a weekly review, just doing something that takes 10 minutes instead of like an hour on a Sunday is something that's much more digestible for me to be able to just do a couple checkpoints on a weekly basis instead of trying to invest a lot of time. So I feel like getting over the roadblocks of what these things mean and just realizing that these can be very small and you can still get a lot of value out of them. That's really what I try to emphasize with clients.
I'm curious because I think we have two good people. I'm curious if we can actually squeeze both of them in. Let's. We're not going to have video for Maggie, but I wonder if we can pull Maggie in for a second and hear what attracted her to this goal-setting office hours, and see if we can offer her a little bit of help. Maggie, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Okay.
I'm going to kick this over to Rob.
Nice to meet you, Maggie.
Hey, nice to meet you.
So do you mind, basically, I like Tony's question. What made you sign up for this office hours? How can I help?
So I work for a business full time, and then I have a side business. So I started a business almost 2 years ago with a business partner. And my business partner has since taken a job that is really taking up a lot of her time, so she can't necessarily devote a lot of time to our business, and which I'm fine with. But now I really want to try to hone in on, really developing that business more and doing it, because it's teaching people how to do business development. And I can do that here at my job, my full-time job. So I have that luxury of kind of doing both, because my small business dovetails very nicely into the business I get paid a living to do. So with all that said, what I find myself doing is sabotaging myself, because I think, I don't have time to really work in this. When you said, set a larger goal, have a weekly review, I thought, yeah, I should do that. And so I say, oh, yeah, I should do that, but I don't do that. And then you said something about having the imposter syndrome. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have been feeling like I've been playing the imposter, even in my business life, forever. Because I do business development for a living, but I taught myself how to do this. So I've been successfully doing this, and getting paid to do it for the last 8 years, but I have felt like an imposter. And so now teaching business development, there is no degree in business development, So if I had those little alphabet soup behind my name, I wouldn't feel like an imposter, right?
Right.
So I thought, okay, well, maybe I should have a coach. Maybe I should think about doing this because I really want to do my business, because one day I'm going to grow old and I'm going to want a part-time gig, or I'm going to want a full-time gig, but on my own terms. So I thought, okay, I need to move this forward. How? I need help.
Got it. And what I would recommend there, well, I mean, first of all, the imposter syndrome idea, as far as not having necessarily either the degrees or certifications to do those things. I mean, you could look back. I would think back with pride to say that you have the talent and the skills necessary that, people look at. That's why they get the schooling and the certifications, because they want to get to probably where you are already. The fact that you already have many of those skills to start from. I think you should already be proud of that. And in a small way, it's, I guess, from coaching, from just kind of giving it a shot to where I am now. That's the way I kind of look at the coaching side as well. When it comes to prioritizing your side business, though, I certainly run into the same. I have a lot of things I'd want to do for the coaching business, and even personally, I know there's things that I could be prioritizing more. And there's so many opportunities in my day where I may be doing something for, let's say, my day job instead of coaching, and I think that's right. But there's also other times where maybe maybe I made the wrong mistake. I made a mistake there. Maybe even an hour before work starts, if I were to dedicate a specific, reoccurring time slot where I could do something towards the side business, it would do multiple things. It would move the business forward, but then it would also give me like less feeling of either guilt or a negative mindset towards that endeavor at all, knowing that there isn't any movement. And in fact, it could propel it to be a more positive feeling to say, I did something, even if it was small. I am contributing towards that side business, and I'm not looking back at it whenever I think about it with a little bit of guilt or regret to say that I haven't started with it. And then you can actually turn that into positive, a positive mindset that can kind of feed into the whole rest of your day. So sometimes it doesn't take a lot, but I think what's really important is beating it to the punch, to be able to make a change, to say I'm not going to leave it for the end of my workday every day when I have the least amount of energy and least amount of willpower. It doesn't have to be a long period of time, but I would recommend doing something, even if it was 20 minutes, and trying to block off that time either every day or 5 days a week. And some days you may not hit it, but I would guess that if you were actually to designate certain time for your side business on a regular basis, more often than not, you're going to have more growth or incremental growth over previous weeks or months that you didn't have a plan like that.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. I hadn't even thought about that because, I do it for my own, working for somebody, but I don't do it for myself on my side business. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And, one other thing too, just to add to that, that can help with this, if you have a period of time that's reoccurring that you kind of block off for this moment, it would even help to do the night before, to plan ahead what you want to do with that time. Okay. To just make that morning even more efficient, to know that you already have a task that's planned out for it. And as soon as you're done with it, you just kind of glide into the rest of your day. But in the back of your mind, you feel a little bit better that you did you did move it forward.
Okay. Because I recently started reading David Allen's book, Getting Things Done.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I bought his system. And so this would dovetail very nicely into doing something such as that. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
You're welcome.
Can we just give Maggie a round of applause for being so brave to come on our...
Thank you.
And Maggie, I'm going to put you back on mute. Rob, I had a question. It's interesting that Maggie brought up GTD because as you were talking about kind of your default system, if people are looking for a system, it sounds like you have a kind of a opinion about a good starting spot. And the virtue of that opinion sounded like it was small enough it was designed to be small with the intention that being small would make it easier to be consistent. And so I'm wondering if you have much of an opinion about small systems versus larger systems. I would categorize GTD as one of the larger systems.
Yes.
Is one approach better for a certain type of person and another approach better for a different type of person?
Well, I'm consistently, well, my approach is kind of a hybrid or a mashup of lots of things that I've been reading. And so I think with any advice or any system, really, I encourage people to basically take what works, experiment with the system as it's presented, but then don't hesitate if you just don't like something, or if it doesn't really jive with your workflow or
Right.
or your industry, or if it doesn't really apply to you, don't hesitate to make it your own. So when it comes to GTD, for example, there's a lot that I borrow from and I use every day from David Allen's system, but there's also a lot that I don't. And so I would say with any of these systems, it really helps to experiment and to always try to iterate and refine your approach, and maybe try to add in what works for other people. And one of the things that I try to work on with clients is if we suggest something and it doesn't quite work. For example, if time boxing is an example. When you say that you wanted to accomplish certain tasks, to go ahead on your calendar and to block them off ahead of time. A little bit, similar to what I was suggesting earlier for just a 20-minute section. I do feel that there could be too much of time boxing in certain examples. So I had a client once who signed up, and I was extremely impressed. I don't think I've ever seen a spreadsheet like this before. They showed me about 2 weeks of 15-minute increments, all planned out every moment of every day. And I was really impressed. And I said, well, good luck. I want to see how this happens. And on day 2, no progress at all. Nothing was met. So that's like an example of the complex. You could kind of take things too far. And so I usually err on the side of being as low maintenance with these systems as possible, making them extremely simple. And then if you wanted to go deeper, if you feel a need to go deeper for certain reasons,
right,
then go deeper, but not to make something more elegant or pretty just for the sake of almost like procrastination at that point.
Right. Rob, let's try bringing Clark into the fold here.
All right.
Clark in the chat had said he had something to say about small, consistent work sessions, and then before we started recording, we also he was also asking a question about goals. So I think we're probably going to be able to uncover both. Clark, you're unmuted. Welcome.
Hello. Yes.
I'm going to turn it over
Clark.
to Rob.
All right. So Clark, where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about those short work sessions, or do you want to return to the conversation around goals?
Oh, just about small work sessions for 30 seconds.
Sure.
So at one point, I was looking around for help doing some academic writing, and I found a site that specializes in that. And it's you sign up, and then there's accountability, and you're working with other junior academics, people working on their dissertations, or young professors. And I forget the name of the place right now, but it's out there still, because I recommended it to a friend recently. But their advice, their very strong advice for that was, don't try to get an entire day or half day and then work on it. Their advice was to work 20 minutes a day and do consistently do the small amount of writing every day. And then I've encountered the same advice when I've been reading about people who want to write novels or whatever, and the advice is write 500 words a day, or write half an hour or 15 minutes a day, over and over. Just be consistent with that. So those both mesh with what you were saying. And as you were talking, I remembered one of the things I learned from you when I was a client of yours, and that was that you always focused on making small incremental changes as opposed to trying to do something big. And so the idea is, yeah, you get something started, and you then you try out, see what it works, try various things. And you don't try to hit a home run. You try to move the runners around base slowly, right? Yeah. And so that has worked for me. In fact, it's worked for me in the last couple of months. Yes. So as for why I originally came to be a client of yours, at that time, I had just been fired, and I was trying to get get a new job, and I live alone, and so I was one of the things I was looking for is just another human being to interact with, which is one of the things you said, yeah. And then also, because I was alone and because I hadn't hunted for a job before, I was at sea, and so this was a way for me to find out how deep the pool was and put my feet, find out where the bottom was, and be able to move forward. As for weekly reviews, I have fallen into a pattern. I'm using a set of tools in which you can't have more than 9 goals. And so I have these 9 tracks, or I don't even use them all, but I finally gave up, and I'm doing a weekly review on each goal once a day. So I do, because I always got stuck before when I tried to do them all in one day.
That almost sounds like journaling at that point, right? Where you're essentially, what have you done today to reflect that goal? What are you looking to do tomorrow? Is that the topic?
Well, it's for each goal in turn. It's what have I done since a week ago on this goal?
Yes.
And it's there's 6 questions or so that I try to answer, but they're all at the weekly level. And so I'm able to get through. In fact, I actually make that as part of the setting the priorities for the next day routine. I folded that into that, so that that's the first time I've been able to do weekly reviews, is by slicing it up and making it part of that daily routine. So
that's really interesting. In a way, that's almost like what I would call journaling in some cases. When you talk about what are you grateful for today? What are some lessons learned from yesterday, and what are your intentions for today? And sometimes it's just a few bullets, but just doing it on a very consistent basis. That's definitely something I've been. If you look at my habitsoncoach.me, that's my interpretation of journaling.
Okay, but in this case, it's tied to a particular topic every day. So one day it's about spiritual things. Each Saturday I do that one, and on Thursday I do one about financial planning, and so forth. So each one of them is a specific topic with a deliverable that I may or may not have done in the past week and stuff. So it's sort of like journaling, but it's focused on a different goal every day.
And so that's been successful for you then, as far as the weekly review, putting it all into one task wasn't as successful as fragmenting it across your day, or distributing it is probably a better word, right? Distributing it across your week,
right.
Being able to focus on just one piece at a time. One thing I started experimenting with was actually, as part of my weekly review, I like to start with reflection. And I considered doing that on Friday afternoon, because everything is a little bit more fresh in my mind as far as how things went this week. What may be some opportunities to improve upon that for next week. And so that's usually just one pillar, one piece of my weekly review. But I've started doing that on Fridays, and then leaving things like, looking at what's ahead in the week, revisiting my goals, setting a commitment, those types of other elements of my weekly review, I still have on Sunday. And for me, that's been nice to kind of break that up a little bit too. So in a way, I'm kind of getting to a similar pattern that you already have. That's good to know that it's working for you.
A pattern that works for you, yes.
Yeah. Clark, could I interject here?
Yes.
Before you got online, before we started recording, I thought I heard you say goal setting doesn't work for me. And that I'm very interested to see, not so much, obviously if that's true, it would be great to help you. I'm also interested to hear how Rob would respond to something like that. Did I hear you right earlier though about that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because you're not the only person. I know that that's a pattern. So I want to talk through that pattern or let people listen to, you know, you and Rob talk through that pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my situation now is the opposite of Maggie's, I think, because I'm retired. I live alone. I am active. I'm doing things. If I were to list the things that I'm doing, people would say that I'm using my retirement wisely. But I'm not heading toward any goals. I'm doing activities that I like and that I do well and that I enjoy. But there's no pattern to it. There's no, I couldn't point to fruit or fruition that's going to happen if I keep doing this. So that's probably why I'm here today. And another thing, if I were talking to Rob, would be that I have read several articles that say, well, you could read articles that say anything, but these ones said that don't try to set goals. Instead, try to build a process that will carry you along, and that'll be more effective than trying to set goals and work towards them. So those are the two things. Yes.
So I think the idea of the process, my interpretation of that headline, without reading the actual post there, I can give you one example. So the goal that I had for I'll talk about last year's goal I had around meditation. So it's hard for me to quantify to really measure as far as the benefit. Although I feel when I don't do it, I notice it. You know, noticeably less calm, a little bit more anxious. I realize I want to continue meditation. It's hard for me to measure that, but I can measure the amount of time that I practice, or my time investment into meditation, or my consistency. So I set a goal last year of meditating for 50 hours. I looked at what I'd done the year before and added something to it. And I said, okay, by the end of the year, I want to have practiced cumulatively 50 hours. So that could have been, I could have been showing up every week and saying, how am I doing on these 50 hours? And that feels like a long time. And it may not be that motivating to be able to say, to be reminded of that end goal every day or on a consistent basis. But instead of looking at that end goal, what I tried to do is come up with the system. And, you know, this is a very simplistic example, but the idea of meditating something like, 8 minutes a day, becomes the system. I know that if I meditated for 7 minutes, that I contributed, but I'm a little bit under pace. And if I meditated for 10 minutes, then I may even be making up for time that I might not have, as far as, reaching that goal. So it becomes something that's much more accessible within a daily scope. What is the very next step, or what can I do now? It's something that represents the bigger goal, but I'm not using the goal, in isolation without any supporting systems or structures behind it. So wherever possible, that's what I try to do, is try to focus on just what I have to do today, or just what I have to do this week, and then having that understanding that those things are representing the bigger goals.
So if we look at like the writer example that I was talking about,
I love the words per day, the example that you had.
So that's a process goal, and even the 50 hours in the year is a process goal, because you're saying not that I want to achieve enlightenment,
right,
to become the Buddha, but I want to meditate this amount of stuff, right? And
right.
for the writer, we have the one goal of just write every day, but the other kind of goal, which is the one that I actually, the kind of goal that you're talking about, makes sense to me, and I can do that, and I can see that it's effective. But the other kind of goal, where the writer says that he or she wants to finish the novel by June 30th. Now that's a different kind of goal. And the common wisdom is, well, you figure out what it takes to write the novel, and then you allocate it by week before then. But writing doesn't work that way. Writing doesn't work that way. If you go to Stephen Pressfield's site, I think he wrote the book called The War of Art, and also Do the Work. They have people on there who say that, they've been working on his novel and everything, and then they took it out, and then he's a published author, multiple times. said he had to throw away a year's work because he could see now that the piece of work had gone the wrong way, and he could see why and everything. So he had to do it. So,
so how did he reach the conclusion that he by investing time, right? By having a pattern of returning to the task of writing, he eventually realized, he came to the conclusion that what he had been working on for, unfortunately it sounds like it was for a year, that needed to be, that wasn't really what his vision was for the end product, and that he needed to continue he needed to steer course. His direction was wrong, and he needed to redirect where he was. But what I would argue here is that the consistent habit of saying, and maybe in your case, it could be, maybe it's not just words written per day, maybe it's time invested in those next steps for the book to continue to return to the task of working towards that novel, whatever those tasks may be. It could be writing, and then over time it could evolve to editing. But basically the fact that he put in that time to come to that conclusion, he's actually making progress. It's just like, if you don't know what you need to get done to get to your end goal, you're probably not going to reach the perfect path to get there. But by showing up every day and making, even if it takes a systematic approach to always be allocating time towards, that end intention, you can kind of work your way, find out what doesn't work, and then ultimately over the long term, you'll be making progress. Even if it's not perfectly, a perfect straight line to the end goal, you need to continue to start. You continue to show up in order to find out what's wrong, and then find the right path.
Right. Well, no real goal that I've ever worked on that was worth caring about was linear.
Yes.
It always involves things falling apart and everything. Yeah, what made the difference for him was he presented this novel to other people and had them read it, and they gave him excellent, if somewhat devastating, feedback on this thing that he thought was the greatest thing since sliced bread was failing in some important ways. So I guess my distrust of goal setting is that he's unable to say that he is going to get that book done by a certain date. It's not a linear thing. He can't break it down. And yet people who talk about goals like that, qualitative goals, not quantitative goals, talk as though you can map a path to it. You can say that you're going to get the novel done June 30th. It seems.
And so maybe the next step would not necessarily be the idea of a completion for the novel, but maybe it's, for example, getting feedback earlier than after a year of working in a silo, perhaps. Maybe it's just the idea of getting something out there to start sharing with others and start getting feedback and incorporating that real feedback, and not committing to completion, but committing to what would lead to the evolution of getting from point A to point B. So maybe in that particular case, it's a matter of getting feedback from others and not holding everything close to your chest, but not showing anybody for a long time, because that can end up leading to some of its own challenges, right? So maybe in that case, it's a matter of reframing what that goal is, as far as, what is the milestone?
Rob, this was great. And Clark also was great. I want to wrap us up. Of course, you're available to be hired for this sort of regular discussion. But before we wrap up, let's just give a round of applause to Clark also.
Thanks, Clark. Great seeing you again.
To come back. That's great that we had one of your old clients here, Rob. So this is exactly what I was hoping to get out of the office hours, is for people that are interested in the subjects that you coach, Rob, the setting priorities, goal setting, to get a taste for who you are, because there's sort of the certain intangibles to coaching, and also the kind of tactically how you think about achieving those goals. So hopefully people watching now and in the future are going to feel like they got that. And then, of course, I want to be super clear. I'm a huge fan of taking advantage of the help that a coach can give you. So when you have a goal, your options are willpower, a book, a class, and a coach. And they basically go in that order in terms of effectiveness. So like our stats say that you're 3 times more effective with a coach, and here we have one of the most successful coaches of all time in this particular goal area, Rob Filardo. So if these are big goals for you, I'm going to, when I post this video, I'm going to post links to hire Rob, and I'll send those out to in email as well. Other than that, I think that's all we have to say. Rob, any parting words?
No, I just really appreciate it. Really appreciate the opportunity again to be able to kind of to meet some of you and to reconnect as well, Clark.
I know.
And thanks again for the opportunity.
Amazing. All right. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.